regulations. The regulations that were in effect before the UNICAP rules, those regulations are still in the CFR. They appear at section 1.471-11. So they are not as stringent as the UNICAP regulations, but they were an earlier version of full cost absorption regulations. Okay, step 3. Step 1, who has to use inventory accounting? Step 2, what costs are inventoriable? Step 3, how do you allocate those costs to the various items in your inventory? Here, we jump off the edge of the cliff. This is the realm of specialized accountants. There are all sorts of methods. We talked a little about this when we were talking about the UNICAP rules. There are all sorts of methodologies for allocating indirect costs. Direct costs are easy. The direct costs of the inventory go to the items of which they are the direct costs. The problem is with the indirect costs. They have to be spread under to categories of inventory that are separately taken care of. The regulations mention a number of methodologies that are specifically blessed. For example, something called the manufacturing burden rate method, or something called the standard cost method. We're not going to begin to try and understand these methods. There are people who spend their whole lives applying them. You just need to know that at this point, the regulations give you some detailed examples of ways that you go about solving this problem. You have to apply simultaneously both the UNICAP regs and the inventory regs, but the problem is a simple one. If you have 5 different categories of inventory and you have indirect costs that apply to all 5 of those categories, you have to have some accounting mechanism for allocating the costs across those 5 categories of inventory, at which point you call in your specialty inventory accountants. Again, I've just given you on this slide a number of the names. The IRS National Office has given a lot of thought to these questions. There's something called the simplified production method. There's something called the simplified production method with historic absorption rate election. You can see, they just go, they go. The simplified, none of them actually do not believe when they say simplified. These are not simple. The simplified method for allocating mixed service costs, the level of detail is mind-boggling. Simply reading the regs on these different methods will set your head spinning. The one thing you will quickly see is that the service hates something called the practical capacity method. This is a method that says, if I understand it correctly, which I may not, if I have a factory that's not producing anything, I still allocate indirect costs to it, which I then deduct as a loss for the fact that I'm not actually using that facility. The IRS doesn't like that. They want you to allocate your indirect costs to the facilities that are operating and actually producing inventory. And with that, we're done. We have rushed through basic inventory with 7 minutes to spare. As I said, first half of next week we will talk about FIFO, the first in, first out method, and LIFO, the last in, first out method, which are the 2 methods of answering question 4, which is what did I actually sell and what is still in my ending inventory.